The Earth Laws Network is an initiative of the School of Law and Justice at Southern Cross University. Its aim is to explore the pathways, the multidisciplinary cross-cultural pathways offered by Earth jurisprudence, wild law and the rights of nature discourse, and the recent rights of nature development worldwide.
Nearly all El Alto's residents are indigenous. These are the people demanding a radical new law of Mother Nature, and in a world first, that rivers and forests get the same rights as people.
Earth jurisprudence is an emerging philosophy of law that poses that there's a problem with a human-centered system of law. The human-centered system of law and governance has brought us to basically a jumping-off place. And we see that throughout the world with climate change and melting ice caps and the mass extinction of species. We see this every time that we're turning around. And we're proposing that this can't be fixed simply by another law. It cannot be approached by a Band-Aid approach, but instead we need to go down to what are the assumptions of law, what are the premises of law, and when we look there we see that basically the law has become human-centered.
Wild law is law which is really inspired by the desire to be aligned with the natural system of order. So we humans for a long time have operated on the basis that we're entirely separate from and superior to nature. So when you get taught law, you get taught all you need to know is in the law library. So you look at the cases, you look at the legislation, and you might look at what eminent authors have written. But that law is inspired by the human project of controlling and dominating the earth. Wild law, on the other hand, is human law. It's law made by humans for humans and to regulate human behavior, but it's inspired by the belief that it must be informed by the order, the natural order of this whole system of which we form part.
I sort of come from a philosophical perspective where I'm a little bit of an annoyance on all sort of types of knowledge, and so I explore things like, okay, rights of nature, what does that mean? Rights is a liberal humanist sort of construct. Do we really want to use, you know, those liberal humanist constructs when we're trying to make sort of huge shifts in thinking? Also exploring ideas of nature, what nature actually is. I mean, we assume that we know what nature is, but there is actually a body of opinion that suggests that we've always objectified nature as something other to human, something which is juxtaposed to humanity. So perhaps we also have to interrogate the very what we understand when we talk about nature. The other thing I'm interested in is how do we, if we can actually determine what nature consists of, how do we represent nature? If we're talking about rights of nature as a juridical concept and a way that humans can act for the integrity of Earth communities and Earth systems, who speaks on behalf of nature?
Rights of nature in practice is a way of expressing in our lives how we embody the principles of Earth jurisprudence and wild law specifically, but more generally, how we reflect, how we live our lives, considering that we're interrelated with everything around us. We're under the misconception nowadays that our current environmental laws, our Clean Air Acts, our Clean Water Acts, are in fact wild law, that they are taking care of the problem. But that is a misconception because in reality, those laws accept unquestioningly this idea of the inherent paradigm of industrial operation as the correct way to go. The idea that people are the puppeteers and that nature is the puppet and we can manipulate it as we like. So we need to be able to step back and consider how do we govern ourselves so that we live our lives on a day-to-day basis in a way that is in concert, in communion with the interrelatedness of all of Earth's creatures.
Once I asked one of my indigenous mentors, Uncle Dutch Kennedy, what does it mean to have a sense of indigenous identity? And he answered, well, that's my nature. And he said, and he continued on by saying, when I say this, people always think that my nature refers to my internal self, my psychological being. And that's true, that's my nature. But, he continued, pointing at the sea and the river and the tree, and said, that's also my nature. And the capacity of articulating a dialogue between my inner self and my outer nature, which is constructed in my culture, is what determines my indigenous identity. And that made me think quite deeply, because Indigenous people and Indigenous groups and Indigenous cultures have operated according to the principles that Earth jurisprudence is advocating now for millennia, tens of millennia. And as a result, we're not reinventing the wheel here, nor are we actually teaching any new knowledge. What we're doing is we're articulating within a certain specific cultural framework perspectives that have been operated and applied for millennia.
One of the reasons why I chose the word wild was I was trying to draw attention to the fact that most of the laws that we have come from a civilization, and the word itself comes from cities, and it's about imposing uniformity, forcing people to conform, and controlling and dominating. And I was trying to draw attention to those wild creative forces, if you like, the living forces which animate the world as a whole.
I think activism is very much, about a cutting edge as well, because, we can all be slightly sceptical about new philosophical perspectives and talking about them and where they lead, and we sort of know that they're very important because they're the basis for leading to underlying and ongoing change. But we also need to see how that comes down to the day-to-day world and becomes embodied in real change that's happening to things that are quite urgent. So I think, activism is like a grounding. It's like the practice of that which you dream of. I think activism has I think there's an enforcing cycle really between philosophy and activism, in the sense that quite often activism is portrayed through theatrical direct action, which by its nature is a way of manifesting your vision of a better world and taking action in the phenomenal world, or the world as it appears to be, to demonstrate that vision.
How do our laws need to change? Do we just change our environmental laws? That's one way to start thinking about it. Developing rights for rivers to be healthy and to flow and to be clean. That's one example.
Because it's a very multidisciplinary area and draws on insights and frameworks from law, from philosophy, from the natural and physical and social sciences, and from Indigenous knowledges, it would be nice to have a central repository where we can provide resources for scholars, for researchers and activists in all of those areas, so we can share ideas and also develop collaborative research partnerships between different disciplinary areas.
Everyone is invited to contribute and use of this research network. The purpose of the Earth Laws Network is to generate collaborative research, as explained before, that not only provides theoretical frameworks and theoretical pathways of exploring all the questions that we've raised, but furthermore, it offers practical interventions and practical possibilities to be adopted and adapted to local needs. So everyone is welcomed to pursue this pathway of exploration with us.